Welcome to the Property Management Law Solutions Podcast. Your host, Attorney Tim Baldwin, will guide you in all things property management, law, markets, politics, and commentary. Your property is his priority. Here's your host, Attorney Tim Baldwin.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Property Management Law Solutions Podcast. We have yet another episode with a great guest. As folks may know who listen to the podcast, I do like to bring on guests who have a special area of expertise and who can really add some good value and content to our show. So today is no different than that. So we have today with us Brandon Hickman. And Brandon is, I believe, out of Atlanta, Georgia, right, Brandon?
That's right. Yeah,
right,
just
Brandon,
outside of Atlanta.
Great. Well, Brandon, welcome to the show, and look forward to getting to the conversation today. So, as I'll give just a tight little spiel here, but you're a real estate investor, trainer, coach, mentor. You have over 25 years in experience with a host of real estate ventures. I understand you're a licensed builder or contractor. Is that right, Brandon?
That's right. Commercial and residential GC, general contractor.
Okay, and you also are into the investment side as well, purchasing homes, purchasing investments, flipping them, renting them, and managing them. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Very good. Well, give the folks a little bit from your own words, kind of a little bit about yourself so folks can get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on, Tim. I'm excited to talk to you and share a little bit and learn more from you as well. So I appreciate it. So like you said, I'm in Atlanta, grew up just outside of Atlanta, and my dad was actually a builder. So my brother and I both grew up in the real estate construction world. My brother went commercial, I stayed residential. And my wife and I, she had a full-time job. She was a school teacher. She taught math at a high school. And I was working for another builder 25 years ago. And, we just wanted to do something on the side, make a little extra money. And we found a house in our neighborhood that was dilapidated. The people were looking to sell it. We were able to buy that house and flip it and make a little bit of money. And so that's kind of how it started. It was initially just like one house at a time. And over the next really 10 to 12 years, we scaled that up. And probably, I guess the most unique thing is we scaled up to we were doing about 100 houses a year on average for a few years. So it was a pretty big real estate business. We kind of both left our full-time jobs and did that full-time. And then along the way, bought a bunch of rentals, had rental properties, both short-term and long-term. And then now still flipping houses, still buying rental properties, and have now started developing a self-storage facility as well. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Wow. So over the past 25 years, how many, I guess, both residential and commercial units have you purchased?
Oh, gosh. So we flipped over 500 houses. My self-storage facility has 865 units. And then we've had short-term and long-term. So 1,500 probably. Yeah. 1,500 properties, doors total bought and sold over that time.
That's impressive. I mean, it takes a lot of fortitude, to get to the point where that's your goal and that's your vision and mission and to actually get it done. A lot of people I talk to have desires of doing what you're doing, but it is a full-time job once you start getting to a certain volume, and just the risk, taking the risk, getting out there, learning what it takes to make good investment. So that's an impressive resume you've got. So let's kind of dive into this. As you know, we've talked about what we do on our side with our law firm is we represent a lot of landlords, investors, and property management companies on the legal side. So whether that's, document related or, legal actions, evictions, damages actions, and these types of things. So when you look at your side of it, whether it's looking at a long-term rental versus a short-term rental, let's say, how do you sort of decide which of those types of investments you want to get into, and what are some of the benchmarks that you look at of of whether you're going to invest in a short-term or a long-term rental?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think initially we started out with long-term rentals, just traditional rental properties. Bought several, started out managing those myself when I just had one or two properties, and they were local, they were close by. And so I was managing them myself, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
I was, getting calls at 10 o'clock at night. I remember one of our properties, I had a call on Friday night at 10 o'clock, and the water heater was out. And another time, we ended up having to put a family up in a hotel for 2 nights because of something that happened in their house. And this was over the weekend. So we had to pay for them to go stay at a Hampton Inn or whatever for a couple days so we could get the property fixed. So I learned pretty quick that I did not want to deal with these phone calls on Saturday and Sunday. I was married, had a newborn kid at the time. And so, just spending my weekends dealing with problems, water heaters and toilets and roof leaks and stuff was not my idea of a
Yeah.
fun weekend. So pretty quickly moved over and started hiring property managers to manage all of our stuff. And so when we look at specifically to answer your question, though, short-term versus long-term, historically did the short-term rental program came up, 8, 9 years ago and got really popular. And so we started looking at some of those, and we focused primarily on resort areas. So places where there was an attraction. A lot of
Yep.
people do it around the Orlando area because obviously of Disney and stuff like that.
Yep.
For us, we were in North Georgia in the mountains, golf course communities, lake communities, so lake houses and things like that. And really it was a math problem. It was sit down and figure out the numbers. So I was telling someone the other day, it used to be when interest rates were lower, you could buy a rental house for, $150,000 rented out for $1,500, $1,600 a month and cash flow some, and that was fine. And then as interest rates went up and it became a seller's market, you had sellers who wanted a much higher price for their property. So you couldn't keep them as a long-term rental because you were losing money every month. But once that short-term rental program kicked off and people started renting Airbnb and VRBO and stuff like that, we realized if we had properties in those resort areas, instead of charging $1,500 a month, we could charge $200, $250, $300, $400 a night, and people would come in and stay for 2 or 3 or 4 nights at a time. And so that allowed us to be able to pay more for the property, again, assuming it was in a attraction area, resort area.
Yeah.
And those, continued to do well over the last couple of years.
So whenever you're pitching your deal to the bank, do they want you to lock in on whether it's long term or short term, and expecting that the numbers will be affected by your choice, or how does the bank look at that?
So interesting question. We don't work with banks primarily to start with. So we work with private lenders and hard money lenders initially.
Okay. Yeah.
So again, something that a lot of people who are just starting out don't understand. I get the question all the time. Number one, how do you find the properties? Number two, how do you fund the properties? And I have worked with banks in the past, certainly when we were doing new construction and new builds, and we still do once we're converting a property into a long-term rental. So I use hard money lenders or private lenders to purchase the property and either, out of our pocket or through private lenders, rehab the property. If we decide to keep it as a long-term rental, we put a tenant in place, get it stabilized, and then we'll go to an institutional lender like a bank or a mortgage broker to find a long-term 30-year fixed loan or a DSCR loan. But our initial purchase is done through hard money or private lending because you pay a little more in interest, but they're much more flexible and easier to work with, and they don't require all the W-2s and all the tax records and all that kind of stuff.
So when you're calculating your pro forma, in your experience, how closely are you able to get your real numbers to match your pro forma so that the investors are happy with their investment?
Yeah, we've dialed it in pretty good. In order to have repeat lenders and keep them happy, you have to be able to, perform on what you promise you can do. So, we've dialed it in pretty well. A lot of those, again, they're 6 month to 12-month loans as well. And we're giving them a fixed rate of return, 10, 11, 12% interest. And so we calculate that into our rehab costs and our interest carry and all of that. And then within that 6 month or 12-month period, we're going to refinance out of that short-term higher interest into a long-term, like I said, 20 or 30-year fixed. So we calculate it as part of our budget.
How is the how would you say the market affects your performance? Because as you know, when the market changes, as it has even recently, it's gotten to be a softer market for landlords. It's a little bit more difficult to raise rent, at least here, in Florida to a large degree. So when you see the market shift that way, what is sort of your go-to with adjustments, making sure you're still performing properly?
Yeah, the market does have a tremendous change on what we do. I think number one, I would say being flexible in what you're doing in real estate. One of the things that I love about real estate is there's so many different areas within it that you can operate. So like we've talked about short-term rentals, we talked about long-term rentals, flipping houses, even just in the single family side, not even getting over into the commercial side. There's a bunch of different things. And I think you have to be flexible as the market changes to adjust with it. So as an example, like I said, when interest rates went up, it was harder to buy long-term rentals for the last, really since 2021. It became harder to buy rentals because it was a seller's market. A lot of the hedge funds were buying and they were paying top price. So that caused everybody to raise their prices. And so you couldn't buy a property that would cash flow as easily because there was so much competition.
Yeah.
And I always tell everybody, don't buy for appreciation, buy for cash flow. If you have a long-term vision and you plan on holding the property for 10, 15, 20 years, it should appreciate. It most likely, 95% chance it's going to appreciate over a 10 or 15 year period. But if you have a short-term vision where you're going to hold it for a year or 2 years, it might go down before it goes back up. So I tell everyone, buy for cash flow, even if it's only $100, $200 a month, make sure it cash flows. And then over time, 10, 15 years, it should appreciate. And that's bonus. So that's on the kind of the long-term program. And then again, as those prices went up, interest rates went up, then we started looking at short-term rentals because again, you can pay more for a short-term rental if it's in a good area because it rents for a higher price per night and thus you can generate more revenue from it. So really just adjusting based on what the market gives us.
Now, one thing I see here in our area in Pensacola and sort of the Panhandle area, I have clients tell us, they bought a property, say, in a neighborhood. It may be in a good area, it may be close to attractions, that sort of thing, but it's it's in a neighborhood, and they're getting a lot of pushback from the HOA or the COA, even to where they're trying to put in their bylaws that there's no short-term rentals allowed, which is a pretty big deal because that's why you bought the property. That can really affect their investment. So, have you seen that kind of pushback as well in your area? And if so, how has that impacted your approach to these short-term rental?
Yeah, absolutely. We have. We've seen, so one of the communities that we have some short-term rentals in, there were 3 sections of the neighborhood. The oldest section, they allowed short-term rentals, but the section 2 and section 3, they did not allow short-term rentals. So when we were first buying properties in there, we were making sure that we were buying them in section 1, the original section, which is where the lake was located. So it worked out. But because if you bought in section 2 or section 3, you couldn't do any short-term rentals. And then we're facing that now too. So we bought a property in Siesta Key, Florida. So down in, I guess, south of Tampa, but it's they don't allow short-term rentals there. So they only allow 3 rentals per year to non-family and friends. So we have to adjust our budget when we're looking at that and say, okay, we're not going to be able to put this on a short-term rental program. How much can we rent it for 6 months out of the year or 8 months out of the year? Can we find someone coming down, who's retired that wants to stay there for 6 months? What is that income going to look like? And run the numbers based on that.
Yeah. Another thing is, liability. When you're dealing in this business, there is a lot of potential liability. And of course, there's laws regarding habitability issues for tenants and these types of things. Do you see that much in your business, whether there could be like maybe an AC goes out or there's a roof leak or whatever, and the tenants begin to raise concerns or at least make demands on you about that. So how do how do you see those liability issues working out in your business?
It hadn't been a huge problem for us. And I think the reason with all of our property managers, we have an agreement that if a tenant requests something that's under $250, they have the freedom to go ahead and fix it as soon as possible. If it's over $250, they have to call me to get approval. But my philosophy on it has always been with the properties that we own, I wouldn't expect someone else to sleep in a house or a condo or a townhome that we own that I'm not willing to sleep in myself and have my family sleep in. So I was never a big fan of like we did have some lower price properties in lower income areas, but we always took care of the properties and kept them in really good shape, remodeled them if we needed to. So that's just a personal thing for me. I'm not going to ask somebody to go stay in a house with a hole in the floor or a hole in the roof if I'm not willing to take my wife and my son and let them stay there. So we always took care of the properties, and I can't think of a time. I'm sure there's some times where tenants were not super happy with us, but I can't really remember a time where they weren't pretty excited with what we were doing and trying to keep the property in good shape and upgrade stuff as we needed to. So we haven't ever had any issues with liability stuff so far, thankfully.
When you mentor and people who want to invest, and because let's face it, a lot of people, a lot of landlords that get into the rental business, and they really try to just cut as many corners as they can. I mean, some people may call them slumlords, but
Yeah.
it's basically, landlords who maybe don't have the capital to make the improvements, or, they got their money tied up somewhere else, so they don't have, expendable cash to be able to make upgrades and these types of things. So when you're mentoring people, how do you approach this issue regarding maintenance and upkeep of the property?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people up front, when we're mentoring and coaching them, that my recommendation is to do it just like we have, is to take care of the property. I'm not interested in being a slumlord or having a bunch of rundown, beat up properties. And so I don't encourage, people that we coach and mentor to do that either. I try to, relay to them the way that we've operated and what's been successful for us and who we are as a family and people, and caring about others and caring about others' needs. Just because they may live in a lower income area or because they might not make as much money as some other people doesn't mean they're less of a human being. And treat people with kindness, have morals and ethics. And I think, what you bring up there is true in any business. There's unethical people in every business and immoral people in every business. And that's just not who we are. That's not how we operate. We believe in doing things above reproach and serving others and treating them like, as if they're a family member. So we encourage our people to do that. I'm sure there's some of them who cut corners from time to time, but we try to teach them to, make sure they're, treating other people the way that they would want to be treated and the way that they would want someone to treat their family members.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good rule of thumb. I mean, and the reality of it is that when you're playing with liability, I mean, it's a gamble, because the money that you think that you're saving on, not upgrading or not maintaining, at the end of the day may cost you a lot more. When that tenant sues you, if there's an injury on the property, or, or even fair housing discrimination, and these types of things. So, knowing the law, knowing the rules, knowing good business practices is crucial. But also, as you said, making sure that the property is in a condition that, hey, you would want to live in it too, or you wouldn't mind living in that property. So I think it's a great rule for everybody to follow, for landlords to follow. A lot of problems could be resolved with just having that attitude. Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely. What about legal issues? So obviously, I'm a lawyer, and this is what I do for my business, and I encourage landlords, professional landlords especially, to have an attorney. Make sure your documents are drafted properly. Make sure they know the processes and procedures for enforcing the lease and these types of things. So from your perspective and in your experience, what would you say about the legal aspect of what you guys do?
Yeah, I think you have to have legal representation, to upfront make sure everything is documented properly. I've kind of learned by mistake, by trying to save a few dollars here and there, and I'll just do the lease myself, or I'll just negotiate it myself. And the times that I did that were the times where I was opened up for discussion later on, or legal action later on, when I finally realized, I should hire, again, back to what we talked about at the beginning, hire a professional who knows what they're doing, pay an attorney to draft the lease or negotiate the terms, or certainly on the commercial side, to handle the negotiations on our behalf, then it may cost us something up front. But what I've seen is that it saves us a lot of money and a lot of heartache and a lot of risk on the back end. So, I think we've had more trouble with our flips when we were flipping houses from people coming back and wanting more stuff on the house, or thinking that the house, should have been in better shape than it was or something like that, and complaining about that and threatening us. And so we have attorneys, on not on retainer, but we have regular attorneys that we work with, from probate attorneys who are helping us get properties approved through a probate process, to real estate attorneys, and then litigating attorneys if we need that. But most of the time, when you communicate with someone and you try to meet your expectations and do what you say you're going to do, and then at the end of the day, having an attorney who can send off a notice or a letter, or, like I said, negotiate on your behalf, I think it's, again, hire professionals, let them do what they do, let me do what I do, let me focus on the business, let them deal with the legal issues that come up, because that's what they're good at.
Yeah. So is there a point so when you're starting out, typically the cash flow is not as great, or at least the proportion of your cash flow to your debt is not as great. And so getting to a point when you have enough cash flow to be able to hire professionals, these types of things. So in your experience, when did you begin to see that the success of your business then began to allow you to hire out certain aspects of what you're doing to make sure it's done right? Did you see a breaking point at some point?
I did. Yeah. It was actually, so there was about probably the first two houses that we flipped, the one that I explained, and then we had another one. And, as a side job, we might make, 40 or 50,000 on the flip, but we would do like one a year, because we both had full-time jobs. We were doing all the work ourselves. And so actually it was buying our first two rental properties, which was probably 4 years later. We bought two rental properties in the same neighborhood, actually across the street from each other. We bought one of them a couple of years earlier, and the other one came available across the street a few years later. But we held on to those, the first one for 10 years. The second one was about 6 years, 5 or 6 years. And when we sold them, they had doubled in value. And so that gave us a big chunk of cash to really pour into the business. And that's kind of when we said, okay, now we have this cash available. We can start hiring professionals. We don't have to manage the properties ourselves anymore. We can afford to buy some properties that are cash flowing a little bit, because we're going to hold them for 10, 15, 20 years and let them go up in value. Just like I explained before, at a 7 or 8% increase in appreciation over a 10-year period, that's almost 100% increase. So it's almost, doubling in value over a 10-year period, especially if you buy in a good area of town. So that's really the point that launched us from doing onesie twosie kind of mom and pop on the side deals to, okay, let's go at this full time now.
Yeah. So one question I get a lot from property owners who, like yourself, they realize they need a property management company. But there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of property management companies out there. And so trying to determine who you should hire is a big question that I get. So how would you respond to that question? What do you look for?
I always tell people the first thing to do is to ask for references from other investors who are already in the business. So we encourage our people that we mentor and coach to go to local RIAs, local meetups involved in real estate, talk to other investors who have rental properties, and then ask for recommendations from them. I recommend several that I've worked with who have done a good job. I've worked with some who I didn't think did a great job. So I think, talk to people who are in the space, who have already gone through the headaches, because just like with subcontractors, I think property managers, there are some good ones out there and there are some bad ones out there. And when you first get in, you don't know of any of them. And so you reach out to the first one you find on Google or whatever it is. And you may find that they're terrible. You don't like them. You don't want to work with them. But in order for you to learn who the good ones are, you're going to have to go through this process for the next, 6, 8, 10 houses that you do, or go meet another investor who already has 10 rentals or 20 rentals or 50 rentals, find out who they recommend. They've already gone through all of that headache and figured out who the bad ones are, who the good ones are, and who they prefer. And it doesn't hurt them because a property manager can manage more property. So it doesn't hurt them to share that information. So I think that's the best way, is ask for referrals from others who have gone before you and already learned from the mistakes. And now they have somebody they can recommend.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think another thing too is looking at the property management agreement. That's what governs your relationship. And I know, I draft property management agreements, and I have for many years. And of course, the ones I draft are quite lengthy. It addresses a lot of different topics, a lot of different aspects of what the business is all about. And I know sometimes some landlords can get, I guess they don't want to see a long document. They want to see a 1-page, 2-page document. And I always tell them, say, look, if that's all you've got in your property management agreement, then the chances are that property management company is really not paying attention to the details, or they don't know the business well enough to be able to put these things in the document that arise on a regular basis. So in a sense, I think, and it maybe sound I'm not sure if it sounds logical to think this way or not, but the longer the document, probably the better the company is, because there are just so many different aspects of this business, and you want there to be an understanding of what it is they're going to do and what you're going to do in that process. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And again, I've learned the hard way. I started out as a newbie, and so thought the way that you're describing, a lot of people think. And after doing it for many years, you recognize that anything that's not in the contract, anything that you don't negotiate up front, is going to be emotional and cost you money and be difficult in the long run. And I think it's like a marriage. You need to talk about. A lot of times people will say, as an example, we're going to get married because we're in love, and that's great. That should be a good starter. But what about conversations about kids? How do you guys line up with kids and parenting and discipline and finances and managing finances and vacations with family and stuff like that? Because all those things that may come up down the road are going to cause trouble and fights between you if you don't talk about them up front. And I think the same thing with an operating agreement, like you're talking about with a lease agreement, is I initially wanted a 6 or 7 page operating agreement or a 6 or 7 page lease agreement or less. And what I found was that there's so many circumstances and examples that I never thought of, because I don't do this all day, every day. Yeah. You do. You've seen examples of all the different things that can happen if it's not negotiated and put into a lease agreement or a contract up front. And so to put it in there because you've seen it happen. Well, I haven't seen it happen, so I wouldn't know to put it in my own document. Yeah. So that's why I think it's important to flesh those out up front, get them into the document, make sure every circumstance is covered, because you never know when you're dealing with people, certainly strangers. We had an example, little side story quickly. We had an example of a lady who was going to look at a house that she was leasing it. And I think it was the day that her lease was supposed to start. We hadn't given her the keys yet. She ended up trying to open the window and go through a side window. And someone saw her going through the window, called the police. The police showed up. They're trying to arrest her for breaking in. And so it was this huge ordeal. She later came back and said that the house should have had a disposal in it and it didn't. And so therefore she was going to sue us because we didn't put a disposal in. So anyway, stuff like that comes up. It's like, who would have ever thought to put a disposal? We didn't advertise there was a disposal in the house. Yeah. But anyway, those things can come up. And then if she wanted to, she can hire an attorney and sue us. But if we have worked with our attorney up front, we have all those circumstances covered in our agreement, it's pretty easy to go to her or to a judge and say, here's where it says in the agreement, this is what we're responsible for. Yeah. So I learned the hard way, but yes, I completely agree. Have a professional do it. They've seen it. They have the experience.
Well, as they say, the devil's in the details, but really your salvation could be in the details as well. Right. But again, it's having an attorney, I think, in that regard, that's why it's so important. Let's shift into one of the things I also see. I'm curious about your perspective on this, especially on the commercial side, because with commercial, typically you're dealing with, higher revenue, higher rents, and these types of things, and really, in some instances, greater liability exposure for the landlords. So let's just say you have a tenant in there, and they're there for a while. Maybe they're there for a few months. Maybe they're there for a year. And then they begin to fall behind on their rent. And then they make promises, I'll catch up. Maybe they try to, maybe they're making efforts to, but it becomes obvious or becomes apparent that they're having trouble paying rent. And so one of the things I see, of course, is that the landlord or the property manager begins to let them slip further and further behind. And next thing you know, you got yourself $100,000 back rent scenario or something along that line. So do you sort of have a rule of thumb that once you see the tenant behind a certain amount or a certain number of months or whatever, that you take those steps to evict? Do you have a sort of a rule of thumb there?
We do on the single family side, not so much on the commercial, but my philosophy is, I'm willing to work with you. Everybody comes on bad times or has something happen in their life that changes their focus in the short term. And so I'm willing to work with people as long as they're willing to work with me and they communicate with me and they kind of explain the situation, and we'll come up with an agreement. So let's say their rent's $1,500 a month and they say they can't pay it this month, but they'll pay me, $300 a week. And then be able to give me the balance in 2 months. Well, if they do that, we have a side agreement and they follow through on what they're going to say. And when I reach out to them, they reach out to me, they communicate with me, then I'll work with them. But if they get behind 30 days and I haven't heard from them, I've reached out to them multiple times and they're not responding, then I will have my attorney send them a letter that says, they're 30 days late. If they don't have it caught up by the 60-day point, then we're going to start the eviction process. And so if I haven't heard from them or we haven't worked out a payment plan, we get to that 60-day period and I've still heard nothing, then I have our attorney start the proper paperwork to have them evicted.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head there with it's about communication. Tenants who communicate tend to get more of what they need, to stay there. So that's really, if there's tenants listening, like that's an important part here, but it's also being honest and upfront. If you can't afford to live there, then there needs to be an exit plan, right? And most of my clients are willing to do that. Even if there's some loss on the landlord side, it's like, okay, let's get you out so that the landlord can get someone in who can actually afford the rent. But the ones who don't communicate well, or they outright lie to you and you discover that they're not being honest about the situation, I think it's, you got to start that process. You've got to ensure that you're not 3, 4, 5, 6 months behind. Your investment, it becomes, goes to the negative. Let's just face it. It's hard enough, even when things are performing well, to stay on top. So, and the other thing too, I'm not sure if you've seen this on your end, but like in Florida, what we'll do a lot of times is we will start the eviction process, and then in the eviction process, we'll enter into a settlement agreement with the tenant so that they're obligated to make these payments as you described earlier. And then whenever they fail to make those payments as agreed, in which by the way, the court, will look at the settlement agreement, ratify it, order the parties to abide by it. And so that way, when the tenant fails to pay again, we can get the eviction without having to go through additional notices and additional time extensions that's required in the eviction process. So that's a tool that I know a lot of our clients really appreciate. I'm not sure if you experience it from that side of it, but I know that it's a tremendous tool. So what would you say about that sort of scenario?
Yeah, Georgia, fortunately, is a landlord state. So landlord favored state, I guess you could say. So it's not as difficult as some of the other states are to get a tenant out. But yeah, we again, like I said before, from how we operate our business, I want to show them respect and I want them to show me respect. And so if we can communicate and they're doing what they said they're going to do, then we work with them. But if not, at the end of the day, I want to treat them like a family member, but I also want them to treat us with respect. And so if they just ghost us, they're not communicating, they're not paying, then, we have to evict them. And they shouldn't be. We require obviously a deposit up front and then a deposit that's part of the back end too. So it's really 2 months up front. And if they have that, they can pay, then a lot of times they, can afford the rent. And if we see that they can't, we try to talk to them. We've even done cash for keys. So rather than have someone stay in there, say, look, obviously you can't afford to stay in this house. We'll give you whatever, $500, $800, $1,000 to help you move to a new location. We'll help you find a location you can move. We'll pay for some moving fees or something like that to try to encourage them to do the right thing so that we can put a tenant in here who can pay. But at the end of the day, if they are not going to pay and they're just trying to live there and not pay rent, we're going to get them out. We're going to do whatever it takes. And we buy houses a lot of times from people who are being taken advantage of. And we've seen them where, I have a tenant who's been in my house for 6 years and they've never paid rent.
Yeah.
And like, what in the world? Are you serious? 6 years?
Cash flow is kind of bad on that one, isn't it?
Yeah, they're just being taken advantage of. And, the tenant knows they can push the people and the people won't push back. So we'll buy the property, then we'll go through the process of evicting the people, have our attorney, evict them. And it's like, if you want to pay and stay here, you can pay. But if not, you're moving out one way or another. If we have to have a sheriff come and move you out, we will. Because you have to respect the property and you have to respect us and we'll respect you. But if you're not going to uphold your end of the bargain, then we're going to evict you as soon as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that lease enforcement is so important, knowing what the obligations are and sticking with it. We're kind of getting close on running up to I try to keep these around 30 minutes or so we're kind of getting there. But I was going to ask you, so in Florida, we had a statute that was added, it was amended under our Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, where it basically sets up a statutory process or scheme to where landlords can charge tenants a fee in lieu of a security deposit, a traditional security deposit, and then the landlord can purchase essentially an insurance policy that covers, lost rent if they skip, or certain damages to the property and that kind of thing, which from the tenant's perspective is good because there's a fee that they're paying, a smaller fee per month as opposed to a larger deposit. And from the landlord side of it, you might end up getting more protection, more coverage. Have you guys seen that in Georgia? Are you utilizing those types of insurance programs?
I haven't. I'm not familiar with that. I'll definitely look into it. I'm sure if they offer it in Florida, they probably offer it in Georgia. But I haven't heard anything about it. I'm not aware of that. So.
Yeah, it's a good thing to look into. I mean, because as you well know, I mean, covering those losses at the end of the tenancy is one of the main problems landlords face. And so those insurance policies can be a great tool for that. Now, those insurance companies have been around for a little bit, and really they were in business and doing business in Florida even before the statute was passed. But with the statute, it's not only more legitimized, I guess you might say, but also there's a way for landlords to, and there's some protection, there's some disclosure requirements and these types of things that help to protect, tenants from being taken advantage of from landlords who may be a little more nefarious in the way they handle that. So yeah, it's a great tool. If you haven't seen it, Brandon, then I definitely would encourage you to do that. Are there, I know we cover sort of a variety of topics. Is there anything else that kind of stands out in your mind as you're, to the listeners here, whether they're landlords or investors, and just sort of a gold nugget of your experience and what you would share with folks here?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just reiterate that the couple things we've talked about through the process, having purchased and sold, like I said, north of 1,500 properties total, units. It's, I will tell you, you're either going to learn the hard way by paying the dumb tax, and that's you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you're going to learn the hard way by paying it yourself because you want to do it your own way, or hire professionals and let people do what they know how to do. And I encourage that with contractors. Again, when we first flipped our first house, my wife and I did all the work, laying tile, painting, hanging trim, everything. And it took us longer and cost us more than if we'd have hired professionals to come in and do it. I can bring someone in to hang drywall who can do it in 2 days because they have the tools and they know how to do it. Versus me trying to do it, it takes me 2 weeks because I don't do it every day.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with, with most all contractors. I think it's the same thing with property managers. It's the same thing with professionals like attorneys. Hire professionals, let them do what they know how to do. You focus on your business, and you put it into your budget when you're looking at a property to buy for a rental. If you're gonna, your attorney's gonna charge you X amount to do the lease, calculate that into your budget, make sure it fits within the numbers, and then hire professionals and let them do what they're good at.
Yeah, I totally concur with that. So that's great advice for those listening to just make sure that they are hiring the professionals. And if you're a startup, kind of like Brandon was many years ago, there might be some sweat equity that has to take place, but as soon as possible is getting those people lined up. And really working with those professionals as well. If they know you're a startup, a lot of times what we'll do with folks like that who may not have the cash flow, we'll work with them on sort of a sliding scale. Once you get to a certain number or a certain volume, it's like, here's the price, but when you're starting up, here's a different price. So I know a lot of professionals will do that because they want to develop that long-term relationship with these people.
Yeah.
So look out for that as well. So I want to give information about you and your company, Brandon. So I think your website is simplysoldatlanta.com. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So if folks, if you're in the Atlanta or Georgia area, I guess probably anywhere, do you guys service others outside of your state?
We do. So most of the houses that we flip and properties that we do own some out of state stuff as well, but we do through our Simply Sold Atlanta. And my email address is Brandon, BRANDON @simplysoldatlanta.com. And then our Flip Genius is our mentoring coaching program. So we do work with clients all over the country and some out of the country on that. So that's Brandon @theflipgenius.com.
Great. Well, I'll put this information in the notes so that folks can contact you, and I'm sure that they would find it very valuable. I appreciate your time here, Brandon, and speaking with me and sharing your experience with the audience. And hopefully we can do it again sometime when there's a nice update on your end. You bought another 1,000 units or whatever, new experiences and new education.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, Tim. It was good talking to you. I learned some stuff too. I got some work to do on my end that I learned from you. So I appreciate it and look forward to talking again soon.
Very good. Well, I appreciate that, Brandon. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this show today. Thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Y'all have a good day. Bye-bye.